Most people think that they're good people. And when they're at, Boots or CVS or wherever, like the thought that's going through their mind is, well, I want a phenomenal shampoo for my hair. And then we used to have it wrong. We used to scream the charity first and foremost, but someone isn't there to donate, right? They're there to buy a phenomenal conditioner. Like that's the thought process. So for years, we messed this up.
Welcome to the Impact Multiplier CEO podcast. I'm Richard Metcalf, founder of X Quadrant, and my mission is to help the world's top CEOs and entrepreneurs shift from incremental to exponential progress and create a huge positive impact on our world. Now, that requires you to reinvent yourself and transform your business. So, if you're ready to play a bigger game than ever before, I invite you to join us and become an Impact Multiplier CEO. David Simnick is the Chief Executive of Soapbox. Now, this is a company, a small business, that's taking on multinational consumer goods retailers and winning. And they're on a mission. In fact, they've given away millions and millions of bars of soap around the world to promote hygiene in all sorts of places. In this conversation, we dive into that. Why did David choose the humble bar of soap for his business? How did Soapbox mess up for years, not quite get it right, focus their marketing in completely the wrong way before getting the revelation that changed everything? How does David hire in the business? What's the interview question he uses to really get through as to whether people are the right fit? How does he see his role as chief executive? Great conversation to understand how you can infuse real impact into what might seem on the surface a bit of a mundane business selling soap. Enjoy this really insightful conversation with David Simnick. David, hi, and welcome to the show. It's great to have you today.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, Richard.
So what I get about you is you're an entrepreneur who believes you shouldn't start a company to make money. Why is that? Are you just a really bad entrepreneur who's never made any money? What's going on?
First off, I already love this podcast. And second, if any of my shareholders are listening, no, that isn't actually the full quote. I think that the thing I really believe in, and having done this for 13 years, and especially as difficult as a vertical as consumer product is, the fuel behind that entrepreneur can't be, hey, I want to be rich. Like those type of entrepreneurs I've seen fail countless times over and over again. And the reason being is there are better ways to go about making money. There are much more surefire ways to gain capital, to build that type of bank account, if that's what you want to do. So within consumer products, you receive so much bad news on a weekly, daily basis that the motivation in terms of it can be a part of it. It just can't be the actual bedrock of the foundation of why someone wants to do something. Like that to me has been so evident for years.
It's interesting. It's the difference between, I think it's the difference between entrepreneurial CEOs often and kind of professional CEOs, people who've grown into the role. Sometimes, not always, right? But there's definitely a theme that most entrepreneurs, I think, get to a point. I think it's hard to survive if you're just doing it for the money, right? Because you've got to have something that's going to drive you through a mission.
And your listeners probably already know this, but the type of leadership that's needed from 0 to 1 million is very different than, taking a company from 25 to 100. And my hope and prayer has always been that I've been able to evolve faster than the company evolves, so that I can be the leader and or the co-founder or the teammate that the evolution, where the company is going. I've actually really enjoyed growing with the company. So we're in the 25 to 100 stage. 25 to 100 million stage, which is super exciting. But with that comes a ton of process and a ton of optimization. And you have to let go of a lot of things that you used to have direct control over. And that's also a lot of fun because hopefully you're hiring people who are way better at that than you are. and you get to step back and see, things that you used to think that you were good at just get absolutely perfected by people who are way better at it than you are. So all that and more, like I've really enjoyed that. I think that I've listened to a couple way more successful entrepreneurs than I have tell me that any organization, if you were to simplify it as such, have like 3 different characteristics in an entrepreneurial organization. There's visionary, there's an operator, and there's a process oriented type of person. A startup needs to have, especially at the 0 to 1 and 1 to 10, they need a V. Like you need a big V in there, and you can be 2 letters. You can't be 3. So you can be, big V little O, you can be big V little P, you can be big P little V, let's not make all the jokes that just came out of that. But anyways, like it's an interesting mix because the theory behind it is, visionary doesn't necessarily always translate into creating an organized process, forward environment.
You don't say.
Yeah,
you don't
right?
Say.
Oh my gosh.
Never seen a chaotic visionary in the past.
All the listeners right now are just like, oh man, never seen that, never heard that. Oh my gosh.
My entrepreneurial leader is so organized. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, wow. But I do believe that, and this is where I go against the literature that I was just referencing, is I do believe that you can change. If a leader wants to change, that she, he, they can change. So I do think it's really interesting.
Well, that point about people, I specialize in people changing, and I strongly believe people change. People can change. It's just that most people don't change, but that's not because they can't. It's because they don't want to. But when you want to change, if you've got something important, I say if you want to know, people say change is hard. It's like, well, you give a mobile phone to a 12-year-old girl, she will change overnight. It's build a new habit overnight. It's like, we're quite good at changing when we want to change. So I think that's key. So, okay, so don't start a company to make money, start a company to change something. And we started to talk about that part. But let's talk about you and your journey, right? So you've built this really interesting business, Soapbox. I know you've been on the Inc. 500 list multiple times. You're one of the fastest growing businesses in your sector, and you've got a bit of a mission behind that. So can you tell me, like, for somebody who says, "Yeah, I want to do things that kind of have a real impact in the world," why soap?
It's a great question. So I used to be a subcontractor, like an intern at a subcontracting firm for the United States Agency for International Development, like the lowest of low that you could possibly find yourself on a totem pole. And while there, they asked me to look at a bunch of after action reports of how, United States Agency of International Development organizations or projects were doing, implementation work around the world. And in looking at a bunch of WASH projects, which is an acronym for water, sanitation, hygiene, I saw that there was a need for more focus to be on hygiene, because there was a lot of water development projects, but they weren't paired with the fact that, okay, cool, you're creating sustainable, clean access to water within this community, but there is no education aspect that after defecation and before meal prep, you need to wash your hands with soap and or clean your body or whatever it might be. What is interesting is that 95% of the world's homes, and this is a dated statistic, but it comes from UNICEF about 8 years ago. So I need to go double check that. But 95% of the world's homes have access to soap. It's not an access problem. It's a cultural issue. So what we do is we go hand in hand with Rotary International or the American Red Cross when there are emergencies, or CARE, or the Carter Center, or any of these amazing organizations, and we pick up the tab for their soap. And we tried to pair also with boots on the ground organizations like Sundara or Eco Soap Bag or Clean the World, all these phenomenal organizations. And we say, hey, what are you guys doing in terms of an implementation? How can we provide and pay for that soap? And the best thing about all that is oftentimes a lot of the soap is being sourced within the communities that we have the privilege to serve. Now, Richard, why is this important? Let's say you're a soap maker in Northern India. The last thing you want is like awkward Dave popping out of a shipping container and giving the whole community like 70,000 free bars of soap. Why? One, just put you out of a job. That sucks. Two, I also just taught the whole community to wait till like awkward white guy shows up and gives you something for free. So the way that we flip on its head is we work with organizations that already have that community mindset. I believe that the best aid is where you're actually empowering the people you seek to serve and then get the hell out, right? Like the whole idea is that in any type of work that we do, we eventually want to see the need for us to be there gone.
So let me pick it up. So what I understood was that most homes have access to soap, but there's a cultural issue about using it. So, in that mind, like, why the need to finance soap? I thought we were going to go with we run massive education programs or something, but instead you're paying for the soap. So I'm kind of just says there's a disconnect in my mind at this point.
First off, thank you for connecting it. We pay for the soap and the education programs and our cultural programs that all of these organizations run. And the crazy thing is we've seen like demonstrable results, like stupid, crazy results that there's in working with Clean the World, underwriting the soap for that. And they then worked in tandem with Rotary International, which has a phenomenal water program worldwide. Two of the most eastern provinces of India, we saw a 95% reduction in diarrhea-related illnesses for the children that we were seeking within this longitude program. And then we also saw school attendance skyrocket. So like it's just crazy, right? Like you would think that, hey, the rest of the world knows that like, before you start making something, you should wash your hands, especially after you defecated, right? Or after you go to the bathroom, you should. But if soap is a luxury, it's going to be used for special moments and or laundry, not necessarily for cleaning pots, pans, and or washing your hands after you do something that you do multiple times a day. So the interesting, change, you're not necessarily going to change the economic ability for someone to purchase that, but you can change like how someone views the importance of washing your hands with clean water and soap. So although this is possibly the least sexy thing to talk about in terms of like international development, which is like, hey, soap, like it is something that has huge impact, and not everything we do is a win, but most of it is. And the credit goes to our partners, our 501c3 charities that are on the ground doing the sustainable work. That's community-led and empowerment-driven. Like that, I threw a lot of like, jargon at you and or like, fun sayings, but like it is true. Like that they're doing the work. We underwrite the tab. That, taking this a step even further, Richard, like why soap? We got to make award-winning shampoos, conditioners, body wash, liquid hand soap. We have to compete the likes of, Unilever and Colgate-Palmolive and P&G and L'Oreal day in, day out. And what we found over the years is that like the consumer actually doesn't want to buy charity the first time. They want to buy a phenomenal shampoo for themselves. And I don't blame her or him or they for being selfish, right? Like most people think that they're good people. And when they're at, Boots or CVS or wherever, like the thought that's going through their mind is, well, I want a phenomenal shampoo for my hair. And then we used to have it wrong. We used to scream the charity first and foremost, but someone isn't there to donate, right? They're there to buy a phenomenal conditioner. Like that's the thought process. So for years we messed this up, and the buyers of these big retailers like Walmart and Target would give us a shot, but the consumer at the shelf wouldn't resonate with it. So we'd be in one year, we'd be out the next. We'd have to pay a ton of money for markdowns to help move all the inventory out. And like, we just struggled on for years, like taking this, like, thank God figuratively, but it felt literally beating each and every year until we finally were like, look, the special sauce with our mission is that it's the repeat driver. It's not the initial driver of purchase. And the more that we got that, and for those of you who are watching this on video, like if you want to look at a colossal mistake in consumer packaging, this is what we launched with. And for those of you who are not like watching this on video,
yeah, it looks very industrial. Yeah, it looks like you can.
Yeah, this looks like automotive cleaner. Like our initial shampoo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like you're gonna kind of get some grease off it.
Right, exactly, right. Like you can use this on like your upholstery and then use a little bit on your hair, right? Now that may work for mane and tail, but that doesn't necessarily work for us. So this is what we graduated to, and that took. It looks like a completely different brand. Like we changed everything about it. This has won numerous awards. We're very excited about. And then the other thing is that like it's fun to beat multi-billion-dollar companies at their own game. And that took a lot of time, that took a lot of grit, and that took an unwillingness to give up.
Tell me about the spark, that pivotal moment. So I heard, you're doing this thing and you heard about the wash and but there's going to be a moment when you're like, oh yes, so that's it. Because there's going to be a lot of effort behind that decision. So what was that moment where you got inspired?
Oh boy. So the initial spark was, I wrote my brother an email and I said, hey, I want to start a company one day. And he said, that's awesome. I believe in you. What is it? I might come work for you. Right. And I think he was just being nice. But I then went out for lunch and I thought about what are the things that I really want to do? And what are the things that I think are going to make a difference? And how can I've always wanted to build organizations that had a meaningful impact on people's lives. Like that's something that I knew pretty early on in university. So then I was like, well, how can I achieve that being like a 22-year-old? And I emailed them back. I said, hey, I think that, given what Blake Mikowski's done with Tom's shoes, I think that there might be something really cool with soap and having a 1-for-1 model and just being really thoughtful about how we do that same type of model. And that was it. And he was like, that's a really cool idea. We should get going. And honestly, the initial name for our company was Dave's Soap. And thank God that got killed. So my ex at the time, well, we were on Gmail where they had like a little chat bar and we were going back and forth and she was like, well, what about Soapbox? And I was like, that is awesome. So that was it. That was a spark. Call up.
So take us on the journey, right? You had this idea from the start of like, I want to give back. I want to like work on this 1-for-1 model, enterprise with social impact. And then you've been growing so fast. So tell us just about like, obviously we talked about that key moment of packaging and branding, but what's really allowed you to scale fast? What were some of the key decisions that you made or how you operated as a leader? Because a lot of firms struggle.
Well, I think so. Statistically speaking, co-founded startups have a much bigger survival rate than solo founded. That changes. And then also like the success rate of like successful founders starting their second or third venture also drastically goes up. I think entrepreneurship is really interesting because like any career, you get better at it. And you start to understand a lot of the pieces of a early business that need to come together in order to hit product market fit. And then once you hit product market fit, the question is like, well, how do you scale that? And how do you compete against, depending on the industry or the vertical, like whatever the competition, is within that space, right? So a lot of those are like duh statements, but you'd be surprised. I mean, Richard, you work with a lot of these individuals, people coming from like Fortune 500 or, whatever it might be, like who step in and start their own company, may be an expert in a couple areas, but have huge gaps in other areas. So I think there's something to be said about serial entrepreneurs and their success rate in terms of starting new things. We also talked about like, how does one scale as the company needs different things from its leaders as it evolves and grows up? Or the biggest thing I would attribute our success to is grit, and also my co-founder and our team. And I think there are two cultural values that we fervently believe in here. Because in addition to running Soapbox, we also are masochists and really enjoy pain. So we acquired other brands. So we run a food company called Bushwick. We run a baby company called Good Nest. We have a company in stealth that hasn't launched yet, but essentially we sell across all those brands, every major retailer in the US. which is a lot of fun, a lot of complexity, but it's mostly a lot of fun. The key that I would say is you need to find people who balance your weaknesses with their strengths and vice versa. So my co-founder has done a phenomenal job of balancing me with his strengths where I'm weak. And I would like to say the same in reverse. And then the other really interesting thing is because we've been pseudo work married for like 13 years, he's rubbed off on me. Like, and I am a better person because of having worked so closely with Dan, hands down. I am a much better person, far more organized, way more process driven, thinking about, what is the end outcome and then working backwards in terms of all the deliverables that need to be done. I can attribute all those things from his amazing genius in all those areas, hopefully rubbing off on me. And I think, and I would like to believe that some of that has changed or I rubbed off on him.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation. This is just a quick interlude to remind you that my book, Making Time for Strategy, is now available. If you want to be less busy and more successful, I highly recommend that you check it out. Why not head over to makingtimeforstrategy.com to find out the details. Now, back to the conversation. So if you were giving yourself advice, perhaps, or another leader, who's early on in this journey, for that, perhaps it's for the grit side, or perhaps it's for this team. Like, what practical things would you say? Because it's easy to say, "Guy, you got to have a balanced team, and you got to have grit," right? It's easy to say those stuff, right? You can kind of read them in any kind of 400-word blog posts sometimes. But what have you learned about how you really do that? What's like a lesson you've really had to, or a tip, right? A technique perhaps that you've adopted along the way to actually make that reality for you?
I think that one of the telltale signs of whether an entrepreneur is going to make it or not, we already addressed grit. I think that's the biggest pot in terms of a reservoir of a skill set that they need. But I was starting to say this earlier, and didn't actually go through them. The two biggest value sets we have here are that we love to work with and seek to hire people who are humble, hungry, and smart, and in that order. And I look for the same thing when I make investments in companies, is I want that founding team to be humble, hungry, and smart. And the humility part, and the reason why the humility part, in my opinion, is the biggest, is because entrepreneurship, regardless of however smart you are or capable you are, will humble you on a daily basis. Things are going to go wrong. Things are going to go wrong in every way that you possibly can imagine, in finance and operations and sales and marketing and product and whatever. So, does someone have the ability to quickly learn? And is someone self-aware enough to realize what the company needs from them and what they also might need to outsource, as well as build around them to complement what they are bad at?
How do you pick up if somebody's humble and hungry? I mean, a lot of leaders look for smarts. How do you do the other two?
Yeah, hungry is just ambition. It's how fast they respond, how fast, how much they want to work. And obviously there's a work-life balance because it's a marathon. Especially this quote is something that I remind myself on a daily basis. Entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. If you're sprinting every day, you're going to burn out and put everything at risk. So you gotta put your oxygen mask on first. You got to figure out, what's the self-care that you require in order to keep at the aggressive pace that, your growing company requires of you. But to answer your question directly, the thing that I usually find in terms of entrepreneurs that I'm looking to invest in, and or people I'm looking to hire in our team, is I ask them a very pointed question about failure. And I want to know how they've failed. And if they take ownership of it and they say, this is how I failed, I truly messed up. These are all the pain points that I am culpable for. Then that's a really good sign. If someone says, hey, this project failed, but I wasn't in charge, and this really wasn't necessarily my doing, that's the biggest red flag that I usually have in the interview process. And I can say that the people that have joined our team and left our team, or we've had to let go from our team, they've all answered that question poorly.
Yeah, such a great point. ownership. I say we all have a choice of ownership, or we ignore, blame, and deny. And the reality is we all do both, right? But there's a tendency. The one I love to get people on, leaders who feel, no, I'm just Mr. Ownership or whatever. I'll say, well, so-and-so, I haven't had enough time, right? And as soon as you say, I haven't had enough time, you're really ignoring, blaming, and denying, right? You might have chosen not to do it, or whatever, right? But not having, my key point is not having, I didn't have the authority. Marketing didn't deliver. I didn't have a clear strategy from senior management. I didn't have a good team. These are all the excuses that we give when we're in denial mode, right, or blame mode.
100%. 100%. I mean, even like we'll address, even for the listeners here, Richard's doing a phenomenal job because he usually sends out a questionnaire to all of the potential interviewees he's putting on the podcast. And this guy didn't fill out any of them. And he sent me a note right before this being like, hey man, I really need you to fill this out. Otherwise this interview is not going to be that great. Sent it to him 10 minutes ahead of time. This is me apologizing to all of you that
you didn't need to do that. They didn't need to do that.
I don't know. But I mean, I think the thing is,
there's no fratulation involved here. Not publicly anyway. I might do that afterwards.
Well, yeah, right. Just put a huge like asterisk, be just like Dave came unprepared. But I think that there is absolutely something to be said in terms of great leaders eat last, right? To take a little Simon Sinek in that. But I think great leaders also fully take ownership, right? I used to be a former educator through the Teach for America program. And one of the things I absolutely loved is being a middle school teacher, I think does an amazing job of preparing you to also manage adults, because I think emotionally, like we stop emotionally maturing in middle school. We just get better at hiding it. So like all the fundamentals are there in terms of like raw emotions. So when we had to discipline a kid, you'd pull them outside of the class, right? You discipline privately, you'd praise publicly. And the same thing goes for like my theory of like management. But the other thing about that is that like one's culpability and ownership, right? Of like, how do they not only accept the good, right? Hey, this project went really well. You were the leader. Congratulations, everyone, right? But also, how do they, in part of a group, say like, my bad, guys. Like I totally, fat fingered this, and we ordered an extra 10,000 of whatever these bottles or whatever that aren't selling well because I made a mistake, right? And that full ownership of it. Like even I would much rather have someone who tells me that they mess up once a month than having someone hide from me once a quarter. Like I would 100%, I want the person who's making more mistakes, but owning it, growing it, and hopefully not making those mistakes again, than someone who's like hiding it from me and not willing to to fall on their sword.
And the distinction here is between a performance culture versus a learning culture. A lot of people say, I want a high performance culture. But actually, high performance culture, that only works if you're in like a stable environment where nothing's changing. As soon as you're in turbulence, what does even performance mean? But it gives that impression of you mustn't screw up because we're high performers. But when we change it to like high learners, fast rate of learning, highly adaptable, then I think things shift. It doesn't mean we don't want to create results and value. Obviously we do, but it's that performance for me versus learning shifts the kind of the mindset quite a lot.
Completely agree.
So I want to shift gears a little bit for the sake of time a little bit here, David. I want to focus on let's look at Soapbox. What's it going to look like for Soapbox to multiply its impact in the world over the next few years? What would be an amazing outcome for you for that organization?
I want us to be a household name brand. I want us to, ship internationally and take on markets outside the United States and North America. We're currently in Canada and Mexico just a little bit, but like the more we sell, the more good we can do. And I get super excited because the way our team views our giving is we're not making it possible, right? Like we are allowing everyday philanthropy to take place in just choosing not to buy Dove, right? Like 6 inches over from Dove is Soapbox in a lot of different retailers. And that, less than half a foot, well, that's actually half a foot, that half a foot away, like allows you to make a world of difference, right? And is that bar of soap going down the street to a local homeless shelter, of which we work with tons in the United States, Canada, and Mexico? Or is it working in any of the 65 countries that we work with, those 501c3 partners I was describing earlier? Like, that's a ton of fun, but also it's incredibly meaningful that like we get to be the conduit between the consumer making this decision to buy a natural, clean ingredient, thoughtfully crafted, obviously I'm heavily biased, product for herself or himself, but then also the good that they're able to do around the world or down the street. Like that to me, like I want this to be as big as possible. It's so much fun each and every day, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between, the roller coaster of good news to bad news to good news to bad news. I think that's also a crazy aspect of like where we sit today is like within an hour, no joke, Richard, we're like, hey, congratulations, you're getting expanded in this retailer. And it's like, hey, you've been trying to get in this retailer and, tough luck. We have to wait till next year again. And, oh, hey, this shipment is going to be delayed another 2 weeks because, something's happening in Indiana. And, oh, hey, it turns out there's like the return on ad spend on this is doing way better than we forecasted, like all within 45 minutes. And you feel nuts. You're like, wait, I'm like, how am I supposed to process all of this? And I think what I've learned over the years is you become more wise in terms of celebrating the wins, what you still need to do, especially for your team, as well as the perspective it gets you to understand like what is an actual loss and what is the setback. So understanding those and adequately adjusting your own internal dials to respond to that has been an interesting evolution, or at least within myself.
Yeah, that's great. I love that distinction, loss versus setback. Tell me about yourself. What's it going to look like, David, for you to multiply your own impact over the next few years? If you want to be the leader that does that.
For those of you who are listening, I made the money hand symbol.
Yeah, I'm wondering what you mean by that. Yeah.
So it's funny because at the beginning of this, I was just like, don't do it for the money. But money is a power elevator, right? Like the more money that you have, the more that you can deploy. And I think there's a very big fish, investor, supporter, mentor within our cap table. And he always believes that like, look, money in good companies with good people has a huge multiplying effect. It's like, I want to see, you and others, if I may be so bold to, be amongst his definition of good, succeed, because I think good people with money go out and do great things.
Let me rephrase a little bit. I completely agree with that. Money as a leverage, you can use that. And not only money does, multiply. If you've got a good character, good things happen. If your character is less good things happen. The question I really want to get to, though, is like, what's the inner stretch for you, right? So the money is a scalar of what happens perhaps in the business, but who are you going to need to become to be the leader, perhaps capable of, running this international business, right? Allowing everyday philanthropy at a new scale. As we talked early on, right? Being the leader that gets from A to B is different from getting from B to C, and from C to D in that progression. So as you think about where the business is going to go, where do you need to go?
Another great saying I heard from, he's a pretty prominent lawyer within Washington, D.C., which is where we're based, within the entrepreneur ecosystem. And he's like, a CEO really has 3 core jobs, like a startup CEO. One, first and foremost, make sure you don't run out of money, right? Fundraising, like that is he, she, they's role, like number one. Number 2 is you set the vision, the tone, the tenor of, you point to like, those are the KPIs that really matter. And then number 3 is you're the person in charge of who's on the boat and who's not. And that is incredibly important in terms of achieving number 2. And then also will drive the results of whether you can actually do number 1. So I think those are pretty universal on whether you're, 1 million and like you got your sleeves rolled up and you're doing the shipping and you're doing the marketing and you're doing the sales. And if you're manufacturing yourself, you're probably also pouring the stuff in the bottles, you're doing all that, right? And then when you're where our stage is at, you're less of all those things, but you're still very much these three things. So I would say, that having a firm hand on the helm and then also being incredibly objective about who's on the boat. And then finally, just steering the financials and making sure that, we have the capital. Thankfully, we are doing quite well on that, but that we have the capital in order to deploy and go after the right type of investments into our growth.
So let me check. I understand. What I think I heard was that there's something there about how you manage your team that you want to sharpen up, or how you bring new people on, up level the team, something like that. Because again, the question was really, what's the stretch, right? What's that new capability that you need to develop within you if you're going to get to the next level? So I was trying to listen through those three really helpful descriptors. So I was trying to figure out, are you saying that you need to improve your money management? Is it that you need to get better at casting vision? Or is it that you need to get better at building the team? And perhaps there's something else in that.
First off, Richard, you are a great interviewer, and I am terrible at answering your questions. So,
no, I'm just going where I want to go.
but I do appreciate you pushing into it. Probably the biggest thing that needs to happen is I need to let go of certain things, and I need to allow more of our team to run faster and figure out how can we go after the KPIs that we clearly have set. But I think any of those three buckets, it's like, okay, how do we make this sharper? How do we make this clearer? How do I empower our people and take less things or take more things off their plates so they have a clearer goal? But I'm a huge believer of, how do you sharpen the focus for the team in order for them to say, this is clearly what needs to happen.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I'm a strategist at heart. My book, Making Time for Strategy, I would believe in this. And
oh, is that the book behind you?
Because
go figure.
It's my product placement. Yeah. But because I believe strategy is a multiplier, and not strategy is in corporate strategy necessarily, but just in terms of it being a lens to focus effort, right? To focus attention, to focus in on what's really going to matter. And I think, when you bring things into focus, when you sharpen things up, then suddenly the other stuff falls away and you know what you really need to do. It's so easy to have so many things going on. And I think it's a phase. We breathe it, we expand, and then we have to prune. And if we don't prune, we lose momentum. But when we prune it back in, and so I can see that could be the next stage for you in your business. Well, David, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I've enjoyed the discussion. We didn't have all the worksheet ahead of time, but we've got there. Fun.
This is great. I mean, I'm heavily biased, but I hope your listeners also and viewers also have been able to take away some sage wisdom from a traveling soap salesman. So
yeah, it's been great. I love the conversations we've had around grit, around focusing on purpose and not just focusing on money as in terms of being an entrepreneur. I think this insight around focusing on quality and not charity, and actually making sure that you compete rather than beg your way to success. I love the quote about beating multinationals at their own game, and I think it's a real credit to you and the team that you've been able to do that, right? And you're continuing to do that. And then I think really helpful insight on humble, hungry, and smart. Actually asking for people to own up, like where have we messed up? I think is a key way of identifying whether people have actually got that ownership mentality. So thanks so much for this discussion. It's been a lot of fun, and thanks for what you do in allowing everyday philanthropy.
Thank you, Richard. Pleasure's been all mine.
So last, I almost forgot. Let's quickly do it. If people want to get in touch with you or find out more about Soapbox, where do they do that?
Probably the easiest, but well, there's multiple different ways. One, would love to give all of your listeners a 10% off. So if you go to our website, which is soapbox.co, just type in Impact Multiplier, and you'll get 10% off your first order. And then the second part is you can email us at hello@soapboxsoaps.com, or you can follow us on @soapbox on Instagram. Just send us a DM. I'm just at my name, David Simnick. You can send me a DM, whatever works. I love entrepreneurs, especially, people who are just kicking off. And if there's something that, really connected with you on today's podcast and you're like, hey, I want to go deeper on that. I'm a big believer of paying it forward, because there have been not hundreds, but thousands of people who've paid it forward and given us the time of day and helped us start from my college kitchen to the shelves of almost every retailer in the United States.
Perfect. That's a wrap. Thanks so much, David. It's been really, really fun.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap. If you received value from this conversation, please do leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. We'd deeply appreciate it. And if you'd like to check out the show notes from this episode, head to xquadrant.com/podcast, where you'll find all the details. Now, finally, when you're in top leadership, who supports and challenges you at a deep level to help you multiply your impact? Discover more about the different ways we can support you at xquadrant.com.